The sun was setting over the dusty red hills, painting long shadows across the wide open ranch. The air smelled of dry grass and metal dust from the nearby alien town. Ethan Cole, the human rancher, moved slowly along the fence line, silent as always, his hat pulled low and his old boots dragging through the dirt. He rarely spoke to anyone, not even to the traders who passed by his land. The aliens in the nearby town called him the Silent One, a man who never laughed, never shouted, just worked and lived alone. Inside the ranch house, the sound of soft footsteps echoed. Lyra, his alien maid, was cleaning the porch floor with careful hands. She had pale blue skin that shimmered faintly under the sunset, and long silver hair tied back behind her pointed ears. She was quiet too, polite, never asking questions. She came from one of the outer colonies where humans and her kind didn't mix well. But Ethan didn't care. She worked hard, and that was enough for him that evening. As Ethan carried a bucket of feed for the livestock, he noticed something strange. Lyra was walking slower than usual, her steps uneven, her face pale and tense. When she turned, he saw a faint limp in her left leg. A small drop of silver-blue blood fell from her ankle to the floorboards. Ethan froze, his eyes narrowed. He set the bucket down and walked closer, his boots creaking. Lyra noticed his shadow and looked up quickly, trying to hide her leg behind her skirt. But Ethan's sharp human eyes had already seen the wound. He spoke in his quiet, rough voice. "You're hurt." His tone wasn't angry, just calm, deep. Lyra shook her head quickly. "No, Master Ethan, I'm fine." Her voice trembled. She took a step back, almost slipping. Ethan's hand reached out, steadying her by the shoulder. His touch was firm but gentle. Her heart raced. She didn't expect kindness. Not here, not from a human. He knelt slowly and saw a deep cut along her ankle. Thin metal burns around it, like something sharp had grabbed her. "Who did this?" he asked softly, but Lyra said nothing. She turned away, her eyes full of fear. "It's nothing," she whispered. "I fell." But Ethan could tell she was lying. He stood up, silent again, his jaw tightening. He fetched a clean cloth and a bottle of old antiseptic from the shelf. Without another word, he began wrapping her leg. His movements were careful, precise, as if he had done this many times before. Lyra's lips parted as if she wanted to say thank you, but no sound came. As night fell, a low hum echoed outside. Ethan looked through the window. Dust lights appeared on the horizon, alien patrol cruisers gliding through the twilight, their blue beams sweeping across the fields. They were searching for something or someone. Ethan's eyes followed the lights until they stopped near his boundary fence. Voices carried on the wind, harsh and metallic. "The runaway maid was last seen in this sector," one alien deputy said. "If the human has her, we'll find out soon." Another laughed. Lyra froze, her hands trembling. Ethan turned to her, his face unreadable. "Runaway?" he said quietly. She swallowed hard, her eyes wet. "Please, don't let them find me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They'll kill me." Ethan didn't ask why. He didn't ask what she ran from. He just motioned toward the back door. "Barn," he said simply. Lyra stared at him, confused, then nodded quickly and limped toward the barn. Moments later, the alien patrol stopped at his gate. One of them banged on it, shouting, "Human, open up!" Ethan walked slowly to the porch, his face calm. He leaned against the post. Arms crossed, the deputy sneered. "We're looking for a female of the Lyran species. Young, silver-haired, dangerous thief. You seen her?" Ethan stayed silent, his eyes cold and still. The deputy stepped closer. "I said, have you seen her?" Ethan's silence made them uneasy. His stillness carried a kind of quiet threat. Finally, the deputy spat. "Suit yourself, human. But if we find out you're hiding her, you'll hang for it." The patrol turned back to their cruisers, engines roaring, dust blowing into the night sky. When they were gone, Ethan waited a long moment before he moved. His boots soft on the dirt as he walked to the barn. He opened the old wooden door slowly inside. Lyra was hiding behind the feed barrels, her breathing shaky, her eyes wide with fear. Ethan placed a small lamp beside her and said in his low voice, "They're gone for now, but they'll be back." Lyra looked up, tears shining in her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He just looked at her wounded leg, then turned toward the door, his voice quiet but firm. "Because I hate bullies," he said, and left her in the soft glow of the lamp outside. The alien patrol light still shimmered faintly across the horizon, and somewhere the sheriff himself was on the move. Ethan's silent life had just ended, and neither he nor Lyra knew how much blood the next night would bring. The wind howled through the dry fields, carrying with it the scent of danger. and the first sparks of war between man and alien began to burn. The wind outside the ranch carried a strange hum that night. A mix of dust and tension. Ethan sat on his porch, his old rifle leaning beside him. The stars hung low, dimmed by the light of alien patrols passing in the distance. He didn't sleep much. Never did, but tonight sleep felt impossible. Something in his chest kept him awake. Something about that frightened alien girl hiding in his barn. Inside the barn, Lyra sat quietly, wrapping her wounded leg with torn cloth. Her silver-blue blood shimmered faintly in the lantern's light. Every time she tightened the bandage, she winced but never cried out. Her lips moved softly, whispering words in her own alien tongue. The language sounded like music and pain together. Ethan could hear her from the porch, her voice drifting like a ghost through the cracks in the wood. He stood up and walked to the barn, slow and careful, his boots crunching against the dirt. He opened the door just enough to look inside. She didn't see him. Her hands trembled as she spoke to the darkness. "Mother, forgive me," she whispered. "I tried to obey. I didn't know they would kill him." Ethan frowned, trying to make sense of her words. Kill who? And why? He took one step closer. The floor creaked. Lyra gasped and turned sharply, her wide eyes glowing faintly in the dark. For a second she looked ready to run, but her leg failed her. She fell back against a haystack. Ethan raised his hand slowly. "Easy," he said, his tone calm, steady like a mountain. "You're safe here." She looked at him, breathing fast. "You shouldn't help me," she whispered. "They'll come back, and they'll destroy you too." Ethan's face stayed unreadable. "They already came," he said, "and I'm still here." Lyra stared at him for a long moment, her fear slowly turning to confusion. Humans were known to trade aliens like tools on this planet, not hide them, not protect them. After a long silence, she spoke again. "Do you know who I ran from?" Ethan shook his head, leaning against a wooden beam. "Sheriff Vorn Talek," she said. The name made her voice tremble. "He rules the Southern District. He owns everything, land, guards, even the law." She looked down, her hands shaking. "I was his maid, but I saw something I shouldn't have." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. Lyra bit her lip. "He killed a human traitor," she said softly. "And blamed it on my kind," he said, "if I spoke. He'd burn my village." She looked up, her eyes full of guilt. "So I ran, and he sent hunters after me." Ethan stayed quiet for a long time, his fingers brushing the metal of his old rifle. The alien sheriff killing a human? That was a dangerous truth to hold, and if she was right, then the law here was nothing but a mask for murder. He finally said, "You saw too much, and now you're a target." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered, "and now you are too." A sudden noise outside broke the stillness, a flash of light across the sky. A patrol drone passing low, scanning the area. Lyra gasped and moved closer to Ethan. He quickly blew out the lantern. The barn sank into darkness. The sound of the drone hummed overhead and then faded into the distance. When the silence returned, Ethan turned to her. "You'll stay here," he said quietly. "No lights, no sound. You don't leave until I say." Lyra hesitated. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk your life for me?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Because sometimes silence hides a story too," and left the barn. Closing the door behind him, hours passed, but neither of them slept. Ethan sat by the porch again, his eyes watching the horizon, thinking of the sheriff's name, remembering whispers from traitors, the alien lawmen who hanged humans without reason. He had stayed quiet for years, never stepping into any fight, but something in him had changed tonight. In the barn, Lyra couldn't rest. Every sound made her flinch. She held a small metal charm close to her chest, a symbol from her home world. She whispered a prayer under her breath, her mind flashing back to the sheriff's palace, the smell of burning fuel, the cold laughter when the traitor was shot. She remembered the human's last words, "Don't let them bury the truth," and she had run. Just before dawn, Ethan came back into the barn, carrying a small tray of food and clean water. He placed it quietly beside her. "Eat," he said. His tone flat but not unkind. She looked at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "They'll search again," she said softly. "Sheriff Vorn doesn't stop." Ethan nodded once. "Then we don't hide forever," he said. His words made her pause. "You mean to fight him?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer. He just looked out the window toward the rising light where the first patrol ship of the morning flew low across the sky. "If he comes here again?" Ethan said in his slow, quiet way. He won't leave the same. Lyra stared at him, realizing for the first time that the silent rancher was not just a lonely man. There was something old and dangerous behind his calm eyes, something human the aliens had forgotten. Resolve. She felt a shiver down her spine outside. The sheriff's banners were already rising in the town, and the hunt for her had only just begun. The next morning, the ranch lay under a thick blanket of red dust. The air was heavy and still, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Ethan stood on his porch again, a cup of bitter black coffee in his hand, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He had seen the patrol lights before dawn. They were coming back, only this time not just deputies, something bigger. Lyra was still hiding in the barn wrapped in an old blanket. Her leg slightly better but still weak. She hadn't slept much. Every noise made her heart race. She could feel it. The presence of power approaching, like the air itself had turned sharp. She peeked through the cracks of the barn door and saw a line of glowing dust trails snaking across the desert road. Hovercrafts, sleek, armored, and marked with the emblem of the alien sheriff's office. Ethan placed his cup down, wiped his hands on his coat, and waited. When the lead cruiser stopped before his ranch gate, a tall alien stepped out, his armor dark like burnt iron, his eyes glowing faintly red. Sheriff Vorn Talek. The name whispered with fear across 3 colonies. He was taller than most, his face a map of old scars and arrogance when he spoke. His voice carried like a blade scraping stone. "Human rancher," he said, "open your gate." Ethan didn't move. Didn't speak, he just stood there. Still as the post behind him, Vorn's lip curled. "I'm not asking," he said, motioning his men forward. The deputies marched in, rifles humming with energy, scanning devices blinking. One of them walked toward the barn. Ethan's voice finally came low and calm. "You got a warrant?" he asked. Vorn laughed. "You forget where you are." "Human," he said. "We don't need one. Your laws died with your empire." Ethan's eyes didn't move, his voice steady. "Then you don't need manners either," he said. The sheriff's smile faded. One deputy came running from the barn. "Sheriff, heat trace under the floorboards," he shouted. Vorn turned sharply. "Dig it out," he barked. The aliens surrounded the barn, pulling open the doors, lifting crates, pushing hay aside. The scanner blinked faster. One of them knelt, pressing a button on his gauntlet. A panel of the floor shifted, revealing a faint trail of warmth, but nothing more. Just empty space and dust. Vorn's eyes narrowed. "Where is she?" he hissed. Ethan's voice came again from behind. "You searching for rats?" he said calmly. The deputies turned. One raised his weapon, but Vorn raised a hand to stop him. He walked closer to Ethan, his shadow falling over the porch steps. "You think silence makes you brave?" he said. "I've seen humans break before. You'll be no different." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "You came all this way for a maid," he said. "She must be important," Vorn smirked. "Not the maid," he said. "What she carries." Ethan tilted his head slightly, his voice even quieter. "What's she carrying?" The sheriff's smile grew cold. "A mistake," he said. "A memory she shouldn't have seen. Inside the barn, deep under the floor, Lyra held her breath. Hiding in a small crawl space Ethan had built years ago, a tunnel leading to an old water shaft. She could hear their boots above her head, the sound of scanners buzzing, the sheriff's voice dripping with pride. "You humans think you're clever, but your silence is your weakness," he said. Ethan stayed still, his expression blank, but his mind worked fast. Every second counted. Finally, the sheriff turned away. "Search the rest of the property," he ordered. As his men fanned out, one of them kicked over a barrel, spilling grain across the ground. Another scanned Ethan's tractor. Finding nothing, frustration filled the air. Then suddenly, one deputy shouted, "Sheriff, blood trace!" Vorn rushed over. The deputy pointed at the porch, where a faint trail of silver-blue blood shimmered in the dust. Leading toward the fence, Ethan's eyes flicked down for a moment. Then back up, calm as stone. Vorn's voice turned sharp. "You're hiding her," he said. "Tell me where she is, and maybe I let you live." Ethan didn't move, didn't blink. "You talk too much," he said. That single sentence hit like a slap. The sheriff's eyes flared. He stepped closer, inches from Ethan's face. "You'll regret that," he growled. For a long moment, the two just stared at each other. Man and alien, silence and fury. Then the sheriff turned and motioned to his men. "Leave it," he said coldly. "We'll return tonight with a warrant, and if I find her here, I'll hang you both from your own fence." He spat on the ground and climbed back into his cruiser. The hovercrafts lifted off, engines roaring. Dust rising in violent clouds, Ethan stood there until the last one vanished over the horizon. Then he finally exhaled, slow and heavy. He walked toward the barn and pulled up the hatch. Lyra crawled out, covered in dust, her eyes wide with fear. "They'll come back," she said shakily. "He knows." Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "Then we move before nightfall," he said. Lyra clutched a small object in her hand. A broken data crystal, cracked but glowing faintly. "This is what he wants," she whispered. "The proof of what he did." She handed it to him. The tiny device flickered weakly, showing fragments of memory. An image of the sheriff firing his gun. A human man falling. Ethan looked at it, his eyes narrowing. "Then we make sure this truth doesn't die," he said. His voice low and fierce. The silent rancher had finally chosen a side, and the quiet desert was about to remember what happens when a human stops being silent. Far off in the distance, the sheriff's cruisers vanished into the red haze, but in his cold eyes, vengeance was already burning. The sun sank low again, turning the sky blood red, and shadows crept across the ranch like dark fingers. Ethan stood near the barn, his hands dusty and rough, watching the horizon fade. He knew the sheriff would come back, and next time, he wouldn't just bring questions, he'd bring fire. Inside the barn, Lyra sat on a stool, her silver hair messy, her face pale from pain. In her trembling hands, the broken data crystal flickered weakly. She stared at it like it was a heartbeat, something that still held hope. Ethan leaned against the wooden beam beside her, silent as usual, but his eyes were studying every spark of that tiny crystal. "This thing," he said finally, his voice low, rough. "It holds proof?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "It recorded everything." The sheriff's voice. "His face the murder, but the memory is damaged. It needs human tech to repair." She looked at him, her voice soft. "Only humans ever knew how to read these fully." Ethan turned away, walking toward the far end of the barn. There, hidden beneath a pile of old tools and metal sheets, was a rusted hatch in the floor. He knelt, brushed away the dust, and lifted it open. A soft hiss of stale air rose up. Stairs led down into darkness. "Come," he said simply. Lyra hesitated. "Where does it go?" she whispered. "Below," he answered. "Where I keep things that shouldn't exist anymore." She followed him down carefully, her limp slowing her steps. The air grew colder, and dim blue lights flickered to life along the walls. As they reached the bottom, Lyra gasped softly. The underground chamber stretched wide, filled with old human machines, rusted drones, weapon parts, communication modules, and glowing computer cores still humming faintly after years of silence. "This place," she whispered. "It's human tech, but this much power. How did you hide it?" Ethan didn't look at her. "Used to be a mechanic during the border war," he said. "When the treaty ended, they ordered humans to destroy all this, but I kept some pieces, just in case," and he turned one of the machines on. Sparks flickered. Screens glowed with faint human code. He placed the cracked crystal on a scanner plate. The system beeped weakly, then projected fragmented images, static fire, and a blurred figure of the alien sheriff aiming his weapon at a human traitor. Then a scream, then darkness. Lyra flinched, covering her mouth. "That's him," she whispered. "That's Sheriff Bourne." Ethan's face hardened. His jaw tight, he typed commands on the dusty console, his fingers moving with steady skill. "The memory core's corrupted, but maybe I can patch it," he murmured. Lyra watched, amazed at how calm he was. Machines responded to his touch like old friends waking from sleep. He worked for hours, fixing circuits, adjusting frequencies and transferring fragments. Outside, night fell fully, and in the distance, faint engines echoed, patrols sweeping again. Searching the desert, Lyra could feel the vibrations in the floor, fear rising in her chest. "They're coming," she whispered. Ethan didn't stop working. "Then they'll find nothing but dust," he said quietly. Finally, the projector blinked again, this time clearer. The recording played, the sheriff's voice, cold and cruel. He knew too much. The video showed him firing at the unarmed human traitor, then ordering his men to burn the evidence. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes dark. "That's all we need," he said. "Proof enough to hang him." Lyra looked at him, confused. "Hang him? You mean the human council will listen?" Ethan shook his head. "No council out here," he said. "The law is whoever's strongest, but if we send this to the human fleet, they'll come." His voice dropped. "And when they come, he'll have nowhere to hide." Suddenly, the ground above them trembled. Dust rained down from the ceiling, The sound of hover engines roared outside. Ethan turned off the power instantly, plunging them into darkness. "They're early," he whispered. "Sheriff's men." Lyra's heart pounded. "How did they find us?" Ethan's eyes glimmered faintly in the dark. "They followed the blood," he said. He moved to a side tunnel, opening an old steel door. "We can't stay here," he said. "There's another exit through the canyon side." Lyra nodded quickly, holding the data crystal close to her chest. Ethan grabbed his rifle and a small pack of energy cells. The hum of alien scanners grew louder above them, voices shouting orders, metal boots clanging. As they slipped through the tunnel, a loud blast shook the chamber. Aliens breaking in through the barn floor. Bright light spilled through the cracks and the sound of burning plasma filled the air. Lyra stumbled, but Ethan caught her arm, pulling her forward. "Keep moving," he said firmly. They reached the canyon exit. The night wind hit their faces, stars bright and cold above. Behind them, the ranch glowed faintly from the fire spreading through the barn. Lyra looked back, her voice shaking. "You're home, it's burning." Ethan didn't turn around. "It's just wood and dust," he said. "We'll build again." As they climbed the rocky slope, Lyra's leg gave out. She fell to her knees. Ethan turned back, lifted her up without a word. She felt the strength in his arms, the steady heartbeat against her shoulder. She whispered, "Why do you help me still?" He looked ahead, his voice deep. "Because someone needs to." Far below, the alien sheriff's men stormed through the flames, scanning every corner. One deputy shouted, "Tracks heading north!" The sheriff himself arrived moments later, his cold eyes glowing red in the firelight. "He's running," he hissed, "and when I find him, I'll burn the stars he hides under, up on the ridge." Ethan and Lyra disappeared into the desert night, carrying the last living proof of the sheriff's crime, and somewhere deep beneath the sand, the machines Ethan left behind still hummed softly, waiting for the day when silence would rise again. The night smelled of smoke and metal, wind carrying embers across the dark horizon. Ethan and Lyra had climbed far from the ranch, but when they looked back, the orange glow still reached the sky. The barn was gone, the house too. The sheriff had done exactly what Ethan expected. He burned it all. Lyra's breath came in short gasps. Every step made her limp worse. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak. "Your home, everything you had." Ethan didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the glow below, his face calm but cold. "Homes can be rebuilt," he said. "Truth can't." They stopped near an old ridge where broken stones marked the remains of a human outpost from the war years. Ethan pushed aside a rusted panel, revealing a hidden passage beneath. "We'll rest here," he said. Lyra followed, clutching the data crystal tight against her chest. The tunnel inside was dark and smelled of iron and oil. Old machines slept there like ghosts from another time. Ethan lit a lantern. The flickering light showed walls covered in faded symbols, old human military marks. He set his rifle down and began to clear a space. "We need to fix this crystal before dawn," he said. Lyra sat against the wall, exhausted. "Can you?" she asked softly. "I can try," he replied, his voice steady. He connected the crystal to a portable interface. Sparks flashed, and a faint hologram flickered above it. The sheriff's face again, his cruel smirk frozen mid-motion, but the file was unstable. Pieces of sound and image breaking apart. Ethan frowned, adjusting the circuits. "They damaged it on purpose," he muttered. "But I can pull more." While he worked, Lyra's eyes wandered over the place. She saw an old photograph on the wall. Ethan with a small team of humans in soldier uniforms, smiling under the human flag. "You were a soldier?" she asked. He nodded without looking up. "Engineer, not soldier," he said quietly. "But I learned to fight when I had to." Lyra hesitated, then said, "Why did you stop speaking? The others in town said you never talk." Ethan paused for a moment, his hands slowing. "Words didn't save anyone back then," he said. "Silence did." His tone carried something heavy, something that came from losing too much. She didn't ask again. Suddenly, the sound of engines broke the stillness. Lyra tensed. Ethan stood up, his hand instantly on his rifle through the cracks above. Lights flashed, blue and white beams sweeping over the canyon. "They found us," she whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. "We move now," he said, picking up the data crystal and stuffing it into his coat. They ran through the back of the tunnel, their shadows dancing on the walls. Outside, the sheriff's men landed, hovercrafts circling like vultures. One deputy shouted, "We saw them here." The sheriff's voice answered, low and sharp, "Burn the ridge if you have to." The sky lit up as plasma fire rained down. The ridge exploded in flame and dust, rocks crumbling. Ethan shielded Lyra as the shockwave hit them. Heat seared his coat. He pushed her behind a large metal structure, coughing through smoke. "Stay down," he said, then aimed his rifle. The old human plasma weapon hissed to life. A rare weapon in this region, forbidden but deadly. The first deputy appeared through the smoke, scanning the area. Ethan fired. The plasma bolt struck his armor, knocking him down instantly. The rest shouted, taking cover. Beams of blue light cutting through the dark. "He's armed," someone yelled. "Human tech," another shouted. Panic rippled through their ranks. Ethan moved like a shadow, silent, precise, firing only when needed. Each shot cutting clean through the chaos. Lyra watched in awe and fear. This quiet rancher who never raised his voice now fought like a storm. Every motion controlled, no hesitation. The legend of the silent man began to make sense. But they were outnumbered, and the sheriff himself arrived. Stepping through the flames, his armor glowing with the reflection of fire. "You can't hide forever, human," he shouted, his voice echoing across the rocks. Ethan turned slowly, his face illuminated by the burning ridge. "Not hiding," he said softly, "just aiming." He fired again. The plasma bolt hit the sheriff's chest plate. Sparks flew, but Vorn's armor absorbed it. The alien laughed. "Old tricks won't save you," he said. Raising his weapon, the blast hit near Ethan. Throwing him back, dust filled the air. Lyra screamed his name, crawling toward him. Her leg dragging behind, Ethan groaned, forcing himself up. Blood on his lip. "Go!" he yelled. "Run to the canyon!" But Lyra shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." The sheriff raised his weapon again, his eyes burning red. "Then die together," he hissed before he could fire. A massive roar echoed from the sky, a thunder that wasn't from nature. Ethan looked up. The clouds glowed orange. Something big was entering the atmosphere. A human beacon had been activated, faint and distant but real. The signal he sent from his hidden terminal before leaving the ranch had finally reached the fleet. The sheriff paused, his smile fading as he saw the light in the clouds. "No," he whispered. Ethan rose slowly, his rifle steady again. "Yes," he said. "You're out of time," Vorn snarled, retreating toward his craft, shouting at his men. "Fall back, now!" But Ethan fired again, striking the engine of the nearest hover. The explosion lit up the canyon. Lyra shielded her face from the heat. Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the edge of the ridge. Behind them, the fire consumed everything. The ridge, the tunnel, the old machines, all gone. Ahead of them stretched the open desert and the rising glow of dawn. Lyra looked up, eyes full of tears and hope. "What happens now?" she whispered. Ethan looked toward the distant horizon where the sky trembled with the arrival of something immense. "Now," he said, "we make noise, and for the first time in years." The silent rancher smiled faintly as the wind carried the sound of incoming thunder that wasn't from the storm, but from the fleet. The desert was alive with sound, engines roaring through the canyons, sand lifting like storms behind the speeding hovercrafts. Ethan's old rover bounced across the cracked terrain, its wheels throwing up waves of dust inside. Lyra clung to the dashboard, her eyes wide with fear. "They're gaining on us," she shouted. Ethan didn't reply, his jaw locked, his eyes sharp, focused on the twisting paths ahead. The night sky glowed faintly orange behind them, the sheriff's crafts cutting through the darkness like hunting beasts, their blue lights sweeping across the cliffs. The sheriff's voice echoed through a loudspeaker, cold and mocking. "You can't outrun the law, human. Surrender her and I might let you live." Ethan's lips curved into a hard smile. "He talks too much," he muttered, turning the rover sharply into a narrow pass. The canyon walls rose like giants around them, sharp and red. The sound of plasma shots rang out, burning holes into the rocks near their heads. Lyra ducked, screaming, "They'll hit us." Ethan's hands gripped the steering handles tighter. "Not if I hit first," he said, flipping a small switch on the console. Old human tech lit up. The rover's back hatch opened, and two small turret drones unfolded. The drones whirred to life, spinning and firing beams of green plasma toward the pursuers. Explosions flashed across the dark. Two alien crafts spiraled down in flames. The others pulled back slightly, shocked. "Old human war junk," one deputy hissed. "How does he still have that?" The sheriff's voice cut in sharply. "I don't care. Bring him down." Lyra turned to Ethan, her voice trembling. "How did you keep all this hidden?" He kept his eyes on the road. I don't bury tools, he said. I keep them for when silence ends. She didn't understand the meaning, but his tone carried a promise of war. The rover hit a sharp rise, launching over a ridge and crashing down into another valley. The impact made Lyra gasp in pain, her injured leg throbbing. Ethan reached over quickly, steadying her. Hold on, he said quietly. Almost there. She looked at him, sweat and dust covering his face, and for a moment, she saw something beyond the hardened man. Someone carrying a lifetime of battles behind that quiet stare. Behind them, the sheriff's main craft descended, larger and faster than the rest. Its lights cutting across the canyon, its energy cannons charging. End this. The sheriff roared, the weapon fired. The blast missed by inches but shattered the rocks ahead, blocking the canyon path. Ethan slammed the brakes, dust clouding everything. Lyra coughed. We're trapped! Ethan looked at the collapsed rocks, then at a small gap near the base. His eyes calculating. No, not yet, he said. Throwing the rover in reverse, spinning it around sharply. He drove toward the cliff edge instead. Are you insane? Lyra screamed. That's a dead end. Ethan didn't answer. He hit another switch on the console. A small red light blinked, and beneath them, a low hum grew stronger. The sheriff's men closed in, surrounding them from all sides. Lights flashing, weapons raised. End of the road, one deputy called out. Hand her over. Ethan looked at Lyra and said calmly, You trust me? She nodded, not even sure why. He smirked faintly. Good. And then drove straight off the cliff. Lyra screamed as the rover dropped into open air. But instead of crashing, it glided. The hum turned into a roar, and a hidden set of gravelifters activated beneath the chassis. The rover glowed with old human tech. Anti-gravity wings that spread out like bright steel feathers. They soared low over the canyon river, sparks trailing behind. The sheriff's men shouted in shock. One yelled, That's impossible! That tech's extinct! The sheriff growled. He's not just a rancher, his eyes narrowing. He's a ghost from the war. Ethan steered the glider rover through the canyon curves. Plasma blasts raining from above. One shot hit the rear wing. Sparks flew. We're losing power, Lyra cried. Ethan looked up at the narrow gap in the rocks ahead. Hold on tight, he said. We just need to reach the bridge. The canyon opened into a wide split, a deep chasm with an old steel bridge hanging half-collapsed across it. Ethan aimed straight for it. Behind him, the sheriff's craft swooped down. Firing again, the blast hit the sand beside them, sending waves of debris flying. You can't run from justice. Vorn shouted. Ethan's voice was calm, steady even in the chaos. I'm not running, he said. I'm drawing you out. And at that moment, he flipped one final switch, the beacon in his glove blinking blue. The rover hit the edge of the bridge. Sparks flying from its failing lift engines. Ethan jumped out, grabbing Lyra and pulling her clear just as the rover skidded and exploded midair. The shockwave shook the canyon. Throwing both of them onto the rocks, Ethan rolled to his feet. Pulling Lyra behind a boulder from the smoke above, the sheriff's craft descended, landing heavily on the canyon floor. Armored deputies pouring out. Vorn stepped forward, his glowing red eyes burning through the dust. You can't win this, he hissed. Your kind is finished. Ethan looked up at him, his face covered in ash, his voice low. Maybe, he said, but not today. He pressed a small remote on his wrist, and the beacon on the ridge above flashed once. Then again, a sound filled the sky, a low, deep rumble that made even the sheriff pause. What's that? One deputy muttered. Vorn turned, looking toward the east horizon, his eyes widening as the first shadow appeared across the stars. A massive shape broke through the clouds, metal, silver, alive with power. It was a human warship, followed by 3 more, descending like thunder gods from the sky. The sheriff's face went pale. Impossible, he whispered. Ethan's lips curved faintly. You wanted law, he said quietly. Now you'll see ours. And as the first beam of light from the descending fleet split the night, the canyons themselves seemed to tremble in fear. The war that started with silence was about to end in fire. The sky was no longer dark. It was burning gold and silver. Thunder rolled across the desert as massive ships broke through the clouds. The ground shook, and every alien patrol craft in the canyon froze in the air, their scanners flashing red with warnings. Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief. Human warships. They're real, she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan didn't move, his face calm, his hand still resting on his rifle. They were always real, he said quietly. just waiting for someone to call them back. The sheriff's men panicked, shouting to each other, their voices full of fear. "It's the Terran fleet. Pull back now!" But it was too late. The sky split open as 3 heavy cruisers descended, their engines glowing like suns, the symbol of the old Terran Confederation shining on their hulls. Ancient and proud Sheriff Vorn Talik stood in stunned silence, his red eyes wide, his armor reflecting the blinding light. "No," he muttered. "This sector was ours." Ethan stepped forward, dust swirling around him. "Not anymore," he said simply. A beam of light shot down from the lead ship, forming a massive holographic projection of a human officer in full uniform. Silver hair, sharp eyes. Her voice carried across the canyon, powerful and cold. "This is Commander Arya Sloan of the Terran Fleet by galactic order. This system is under human jurisdiction effective immediately," the sheriff shouted back. "This is alien territory. You have no authority here." The commander's eyes narrowed. "We have authority wherever human blood has been spilled unjustly," she said, her gaze turning toward Ethan. "Signal received, transmission verified. Cole, is the evidence secure?" Ethan nodded once, holding up the small data crystal. "Proof's intact, ma'am." Vorn's face twisted with rage. "You think a dead man's recording will change anything?" He snarled. "The council won't believe you." Ethan looked at him, his voice steady. "They don't have to," he said. "You're done." The sheriff raised his plasma weapon. "You won't leave this canyon alive." He roared, firing. The beam missed Ethan by inches, blasting rock behind him. In an instant, the Terran fleet responded. Bright blue beams fired from orbit, striking the ground near Vorn's men, knocking them off balance. Sand exploded into the air, the shockwave deafening. Ethan took cover, pulling Lyra close. "Stay behind me," he said. His tone soft but firm. Lyra looked up at him, tears mixing with dust. "You called them for me?" she asked. Ethan shook his head slightly. "For what's right above?" Smaller human dropships detached from the cruisers, descending fast, soldiers in silver armor landing with perfect precision, their boots slamming into the canyon floor, their rifles glowing faintly blue. The alien deputies fell back, outnumbered and terrified. Sheriff Vorn, furious and desperate, grabbed Lyra from behind before she could react, his sharp claws pressing against her throat. "Stop!" he shouted, dragging her into the open. "You fire again and she dies." The human soldiers hesitated, weapons raised but waiting. Ethan froze, his face unreadable. "Don't move," Vorn barked. "You want justice? Then watch your witness bleed." Lyra's voice trembled. "Ethan," she whispered, tears in her eyes. The sheriff pressed harder. "You humans think you're gods, but you're just ghosts clinging to power." Ethan's voice came low and steady. "Maybe," he said. "But even ghosts remember how to shoot." In a single motion, he raised his rifle and fired. The plasma bolt hit Vorn's shoulder, spinning him back. Lyra fell free, crawling away. The sheriff roared in pain, firing wildly. The blast missed and hit one of his own men. The canyon echoed with chaos. Human soldiers advanced, moving with machine-like precision. 2 soldiers reached Lyra, pulling her to safety. While Ethan walked forward, weapon still aimed, the sheriff stumbled, his armor cracked, his pride burning away. "You don't know what you've done," he hissed. "You've started a war." Ethan looked down at him, eyes cold as steel. "No," he said. "You did." The sheriff tried to raise his weapon again. But Ethan's shot struck first, ending it. Silence fell. Only the hum of ships filled the air now. Lyra looked up from the soldier's arms, her voice breaking. "It's over?" she asked. Ethan nodded slightly. "For now?" Commander Sloan's voice came through the comms. "All enemy forces neutralized, Cole. Your signal woke us from exile." Ethan looked up at the ship. "Didn't plan to," he said. "But I'm glad you still listen." Sloan smiled faintly through the projection. "The fleet always answers its own." As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight touched the canyon floor. The smoke fading into gold mist, human soldiers began gathering alien prisoners, marking the sheriff's fallen craft. Ethan stood apart, watching silently, his rifle slung over his shoulder. Lyra limped toward him, her legs still bandaged, her eyes full of gratitude and something softer. "You saved me," she said quietly, "and you saved the truth." Ethan looked at her, then at the sky where the human ships hovered. "Truth saved itself," he said. "I just gave it a voice," she smiled faintly, the wind brushing her silver hair. "You're not as silent as they say," she whispered. Ethan looked away, his lips curving slightly. "Don't get used to it," he said. as the Terran fleet rose higher, their engines thundering across the desert. Ethan watched them fade into the clouds. The war was over for now, but he knew peace never lasted long out here still. For the first time in years, he felt something he thought he'd buried long ago: hope. The silent rancher finally let himself breathe.